Hi, I'm Entertainment Weekly senior editor Patrick Gomez, and we are here at the cover shoot for EW's annual LGBTQ issue. Thank you guys so much for being a part of this issue. It looks like you guys have been having a lot of fun.
Oh, it's been great. You invited the coolest folks.
You seen this bar set?
It's pretty fantastic. Well, what we love is that it has been 50 years since the riots at Stonewall, so we kind of wanted to recreate that feel because that was such a momentous occasion in the LGBTQ rights movement. So we're really happy that you guys are being a part of that. Obviously, by just being yourselves, you're making sure that LGBTQ plus people are being represented in media. But by taking the step of being here today, you're making sure that they're being celebrated. Why is that important for you guys to not just be present, but vocal members of the community?
Oh, well, shoot, every time one of us comes out that is visible is so monumental. I mean, I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in Kansas and in the 70s, and there was no gay people. You know, it was still a mental health issue. So I remember just seeing the cover of Time or Newsweek that had, you know, two men holding hands, and it was like, what's this? So any time you can do that, it helps people who think that they're alone, who think that there's nobody like them, who think that you know they can't be happy. You know, you get to show the beautiful rainbow of people, and it's a good thing.
I think it's important in light of recent progress to remember how we got here, and that there was a time when this wasn't possible, that you couldn't walk down the street in major cities with, you know, holding your partner's hand and being your entire self. And I think as we continue to progress and work towards actual equality, complete equality, it's important to remind a younger generation so that they don't take for granted the rights that we've gained. And that they continue the fight to sustain this movement, because once we gain the rights, we have to continue to protect them.
I also think it's interesting that how rarely, I mean, when you actually think about it, you see man and a man or a woman and a woman holding hands walking down the street. I mean, maybe you see it in sort of gay neighborhoods, but I travel around the country all the time, and I can tell you don't see it in airports, you know, even in New York. And to me, that's just one little sign of how much farther there is to go in terms of holding hands and not having a second thought about it of like, well, wait a minute, what neighborhood is this? Where am I? Is this something that people are going to react?
It's totally true. The normalcy element of it, it just gets sort of worn away the more examples there are of people in their own individual stories. And so to just have examples of people on TV, in a magazine, in music, I feel like that's kind of what our potential obligation can be. Some people choose to be big activists and really try and move the needle and make a big difference, but other people can just exist. And I think just existing in a lot of ways creates change as well.
And also knowing how deeply unsafe and uncomfortable it is to just show up and be fully yourself, you know, that in and of itself is, Neil Patrick Harris just said, it's deeply, that's activism in and of itself by just being, right? And so the idea of being able to hold your partner's hand or to be yourself and to show up fully as you are, I think is something that everyone's gaining toward. And I think that when we think about Stonewall, right, what they were fighting against is that this idea that they had this small safe space, but even that in and of itself was deeply, you know, policed. We have to remember that at that time there were raids, right? And there was one too many raids on one too many nights for these queer and trans people, and they were sick of it, right? And they had to fight to say that we deserve at least a safe space if we're not going to get it in our own full city, right? And so I think that today, people like us and many others who are in media or in their small towns, in their schools, who can show up fully and show other people that it's possible, I think that that's hopefully what's going to help continue to build and build and build.
So Wilson said something I think is really important. It became very important to me with the realization that, you know, we stand on the shoulders of generations of people who have lived and died often in silence, and who lived half-lives in some ways, you know, who loved but loved in the shadows, who were fearful of being fired from their jobs or sent to a mental hospital, being castrated. You know, we think about the modern March for LGBTQ equality is starting with Stonewall, but in fact, I mean, it started long before that.
Yeah.
And you know, in the 1920s in New York, there were balls in Harlem that you know, that were very well attended. And so, I mean, gay people have always been here. Trans people have always been here. Lesbians, you know, it just has existed in the shadows. And I think that, to me, is just one of the saddest things, is to think about. It's both sad for me and hopeful that, one, to think about people who were not able to fully express themselves and fully express their love in the way that they wanted to publicly, and the price so many people paid. I mean, literally, you know, being hospitalized or forced hospitalization or in jail. And yet, at the same time, to me, the hopeful part of that is that even with all that, even with an entire society attempting to repress and squash the love that people had for each other, people found ways to love and to live and to have lives. And I think that's, to me, one of the most extraordinary things, and things that I'm so moved by when I think about our history.
Well, what I think of when I think of Stonewall, and it's ironic, is that this was a rebellion. It was a riot started by people of color and trans people. And it's ironic to me that in this moment when we're talking about diversity in our entire culture, but also within the LGBTQ community, about visibility in terms of diversity, we stand on the shoulders of trans people and people of color who started this modern era of LGBTQ equality. So for me, it's important to celebrate Stonewall, to celebrate those people, and to thank them for the life that I've been afforded.
Melissa mentioned seeing that cover of the magazine with two men holding hands. For each of you, were there touchstone images or people that you met, and those could be public figures or just people from your private life, that gave you the hope or the idea that you could live the life that you inevitably wanted to live?
What's so wild to me is Wilson Cruz playing Ricky Vasquez was one of those possibility models for me, watching My So-Called Life. The fact that there was, you know, this queer, gender non-conforming, you know, discarded homeless youth that looked like me and my people and my communities, that was deeply affirming to see. I also think so much about, you know, the folk who are featured in Paris is Burning. We know that when we, you know, talk about, you know, of course there's New York City at that time period fighting gentrification and the HIV/AIDS epidemic, of course poverty and being folk of color, living uptown. As Anderson said, the creativity, the resilience, the idea that despite being discarded from your own home, your own communities, your own schools, that you can come together in some strange way as these band of misfits and create something beautiful. Their audacity to dream, to aspire, to want, despite everything. You know, that's like, to me, that's what I hope that, you know, other folk watching today and seeing us and seeing all the many others who just are able to be themselves, that they also then want.
The choice to be happy, despite the circumstances that those people in that film were living under, right? To find joy in life and in each other. We still see that. I see it at Pride every year, right? That's who we are. At our core, we are a people who faces discrimination and are made or attempted to make shameful for who we are. And yet, despite it, when people think of us in our community, it's a rainbow. It's joy.
Cuts across everything. Community is so important. Each other, all the, and you know, I hated rainbows when I was a kid, but I was like, okay, rainbows is us, all right, it's good. So we're
embracing that
I
here.
know, rainbows, bring it on.
For me, it was Ellen's coming out in a magazine cover that said, "Yep, I'm gay." I thought that was really amazing because I liked the yep in it. It seemed relatively inconsequential. It didn't seem like big news, even though it was the cover of this magazine. And it
But
was,
let's not forget that,
That she was
that
punished.
story is a
punished
story
too,
of
yeah.
resilience as well, right?
Yeah.
That wasn't automatic.
We were
for sure, you had
Yeah.
to band around her a little bit.
It was a beautiful community we had there in Hollywood. There was a straight and gay in all of us, and it was really supportive. And we all kept saying, "Well, are you going to come out? Are you going to come out?" And sort of one at a time. And we really supported each other. And I think that's what the gay, we call it the gay community or whatever we want to call it, the rainbow community. It does that. Each of us can relate in that one way, even though we're so different in so many other ways.
Who was it for you?
I feel listening to all of this, I'm like, I was very isolated in a country town in Australia because I would try to find someone that I could identify with on television. And it would be someone that would pop up randomly in like a daytime soap. Don't ask me why I was home on a school day. There'd be some daytime soap opera and I'd be like, oh my goodness, this is a bisexual woman or a curious woman or whatever I was given. But then she would die in some spectacular fashion after an episode in like a tidal wave that only killed one gay person. And that would always be devastating, and then I'd stop that show. And really the only one that was consistent was, and it was more of an assumption, is Xena Warrior Princess. And Gabrielle's story. And that was the only, and she was a strong woman, and then this other strong woman, and they needed each other, and they loved each other, and they were gentle, but then they were like, la 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 la. It was everything I needed at that age. And obviously it's just like just like dial-up internet. Like I didn't get sort of, I do feel really lucky for people today that can go online and find a community wherever they are in the world. And I think that's why things like this are great, things like this, which will appear online, and the shoots that we're doing, and then everything that we do that is from music to arts to films, that people can watch these now wherever they are, whereas I didn't really realize it until I was a little older, and I think The L Word was probably the first show that I was like, is this going to stay on air? Is this going to be something like, it was at midnight on like a Tuesday, of course. But it was great, and then it got more and more popular, and then there was Queer as Folk, and then there was, now there's just plethora of shows that we can watch and identify with, and you can just tell that that's making an enormous difference to these at-risk people that I was when I was young. And the only reason why I got into this industry at all was to want to be someone that could represent what I needed when I was young. And I think that goes back to sort of the first question, is sort of why is it important to give back or to be an activist or to even just exist in your authentic self, is because I needed that when I was, from birth to, now. Still need it. Still love looking around at my peer friends and people that are doing this. And I just think that every single person on this sofa can say that they know one way they've impacted someone's life, and they know the risks they took, and it's just so individual, but it's so rewarding that we can't ever forget that that's the driving force as to why we're where we are and why we have people that support and love us, and we owe that back.
I just wanted to say, and then I'll shut up, is first of all, thank you for saying that. But for me, because there really was no one. I combed the magazines and searched for someone that I could relate to, and it wasn't until I read James Baldwin's Giovanni's Room in my bedroom by myself that I understood that I could be a gay person of color who was smart and fierce and could write. And then I found videos of him on Dick Cavett where he spoke so passionately and eloquently and openly about who he was. And then for me, that was a path for me. I was like, oh, I can do that too. He gave me permission to be me, and he was long gone by then.
You mentioned Ellen coming out on the cover of a magazine. She's not the only one that did something like that, and many of you had to make public statements if you were already in the public eye before coming out. For each of you, though, even those of you that came out kind of as or before you were in the public eye, walk me through the process of having to do that public come out, and how was that different from your personal come out stories?
Well, I personally came out when I was leaving home when I was 18. I'm like, I'm gay, and they were like, we know, and, obvious. So, my mother didn't talk to me for a while, but that all came back when Chris Blackwell signed me to Island Records, he knew, he said, okay, what are we going to do about this gay thing? And I said, I don't know, I'm not going to be anyone I'm not. And he said, well, as long as you don't flag wave. So I was out to everybody who knew me. There was just this funny, it was actually a don't ask, don't tell. Nobody in the press would ask. And it wasn't until I did a lot of work for the Bill Clinton campaign, his first presidential campaign, and it was when the gay community, boy, I met so many beautiful, our gay leaders. Yes, yeah. I met so many just strong people that were doing so much work in the AIDS and ACT UP, Urvashi Vade, and these beautiful, beautiful people, and they really inspired me. And so at at the inaugural ball, we had the triangle ball. It was the most fun ball of all, of course. And I just said, oh, I'm gay, and it was just this little blurb, and it just went from there. So, it just kind of, there comes a time when you just do it.
Anderson, I know that what we've come to know and expect from our news anchors has changed over the years. It used to be that we didn't really know anything about them personally. Mm-hmm. How much do you feel like that changing climate paved the way for you to be able to come out?
Yeah, I mean, I came out in high school to my friends, and I was in love with this guy, and I was like so desperate. I was like, just asked all my friends how I could get him. So, I mean, I sort of always felt like I was out. I had boyfriends, I'd go out dancing, I'd go to bars and stuff. But reporters didn't really talk about their personal lives. And but then with Twitter and the internet, and suddenly you could access something about anybody you wanted to know, and the expectation became that you're a public person, you should be public. And in the world of journalism, that was kind of still, I don't know, it was a difficult thing to navigate. I was traveling in the Middle East a lot. I was spending most of my early years in the war zones, and going to a lot of countries where it's illegal, and where at the time I had no security, and I was by myself, and in Somalia and all these places. And so it was just easier not to say something. But I certainly, look, I reached a point where by not saying something, I realized I was saying something. I thought about it a long time. I spent a lot of time writing out kind of an explanation, a letter, and I decided not to try to make like a big deal about it at the time. I just published it on a website of a friend of mine, Andrew Sullivan, and that was it. It was actually funny because I was in Africa shooting something when it was published, and I didn't realize I was in a place that had absolutely no cell phone service for like 3 days. So I had no idea like what sort of
blessing.
It was rather nice, yeah. So it was just, as soon as I got to Johannesburg, my phone sort of lit up, and I'd realized I'd forgotten to tell my mom I was going to make this announcement. I mean, she obviously, I'd come out to her a long time ago, but she was like, oh, you could have given me a heads up.
I thought the same way as Anderson for a long time. I wasn't at all like closeted, trying not to reveal myself. I just thought that as an actor, and I would assume as a journalist as well, you need to be seen, you need to have the opportunity to be seen as a bunch of different things. And so I didn't deny anything at all, but then I started seeing that by not saying anything, it seemed like you were saying something. And actually, I was dating my now husband, and I realized it was most disrespectful to him to go in the car to an opening of a movie or something and get out, and I would go down the carpet and he would go with our publicist behind where the camera guys were, and we'd meet up at the end. It just felt disrespectful. It just didn't feel like you were standing tall and being okay with who you were. Even though I was trying to couch it in the conversation of, but if I want to play a jock sometime, I don't want people to watch me differently. But no one really cares. I mean, honestly, there are so many examples now of every type of super effete, super burly, there's just everything. It is a rainbow of representation now. So I'm very lucky that when I had to make a public statement, Ellen had come before, Lance Bass had come out before. I was happily making a statement before I had to make a statement. And I guess I was proud of that a little bit.
I actually got outed by one of those, what is it? guess who, don't sue type scenarios. I just realized I had forgotten about that. Yeah, but I didn't. I was just like, what took you so long? But because I came out when I was 12, and my mum was like, yeah, I know. Yeah. Used to cut the head off Ken Barbie's head, and everyone else was in a relationship. I'm like,
I used to shave G.I. Joe's head because it wasn't short enough.
That's just hot.
See? It's kind of hot.
Actually, your hair is really nice and short.
Oh, you too. And then I started working at MTV, and everyone sort of knew, but we hadn't discussed it publicly yet. And it had only been like a month. And they were sort of discussing like, when that time comes, how did I want to approach it? And I was just like, what do you mean? I just say it. And they were like, well, no, do you think, and certain people were not like this, but some were more worried about coming out as gay and if I should try coming out as bisexual. And I was like, no, like, I don't know how to pretend to be bisexual. That's weird. I can't. Does that mean I have to, like, I don't even know what that looks like because I've only ever been gay. And so I said, no, I'll just tell them the truth when it comes up, and hopefully sooner than later. But they didn't want it to distract from my job and having the announcement and working there. And I hated having to, like, not be able to say anything for the month that it was because I was so open for so long. So when it came out in this article, like, guess who, don't sue, but what brand new TV presenter on MTV? Like, it was obviously there could only be one person. I was like, it's me. And they were all just like, oh, did you do this? I'm like, no, I actually didn't, but it's a great idea. And came out and didn't realize that I was one of the very few in Australia to come out. And then after me, it was amazing watching all these people, peers in the music industry and film and television and presenting, come out, and me not realize how big of a deal it was to do that at such a young age. It was actually very, like, an amazing experience.
That said, though, I don't think that anyone should be told when anything is supposed to happen. And I think tolerance is something that is really important. It's what we teach our kids, because you really need to be tolerant of so many things, and it's a hard skill to kind of wrap your head around. We also have to be tolerant of people who aren't comfortable coming out yet. Yeah. Because being thrust into a position that you don't want to be in is traumatic, right? So some people, it's a really big deal to say to their best friends, to their parents. Some people are out to everyone but their parents, and that's okay, right? And some people are only out to their family but not to their friends at work, and that's a big thing for them. So again, I think supporting tolerance, but it's supporting everyone's story, because everyone's little baby steps are their own. And at the end of the day, in my situation, I announced and nothing really happened. It was a kind of a shruggy announcement.
One of the things I think also that, there's two things. One, I think it's going to be really interesting to see sort of the future of what gay life becomes. And, you know, the way I grew up and the way, generations of gay people have grown up is so different now, and that's a remarkable thing. And so I'm really interested to see, how gay life sort of shifts, and for good or for bad. I'm not necessarily saying it needs to change, but the other thing I just think is that's been really important to me lately is there's this Instagram site called the AIDS Memorial, and I just feel like there's been an entire generation of gay people who were lost in a Holocaust, were lost in a war that many people have completely forgotten, even many people who are, coming up gay now. And I just think it's important in, as we celebrate, the anniversary of Stonewall and celebrate the lives that people are able to live now, to remember all those lives that were just snuffed out in 23-year-olds, 24-year-olds, and I don't know. I don't hate to bring it down, but I just think that's so important that, like,
I think it's important to talk about.
We all think like we're the first ones to go through this. There have been generations of people who have gone through it, and all of us have been here before in 1982. And if we were alive then and sexually active, there's a good chance, we wouldn't be here right now.
Well, and it was because of that pandemic that we built as a community an infrastructure that we needed to build in order to take care of each other.
Right, because no one else was.
No one else was. And because of that infrastructure, we created a movement that actually had teeth.
Right.
And so we have, we built this equality, this current equality we have, on the backs of the people who we lost in the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, you have to see How to Survive a Plague, the
Yeah.
documentary, and there's a great book too, which is.
We have all these organizations, right? GLAAD and HRC and the task force, that really were built up in the AIDS pandemic, and that went on to take us where we are today.
I'm sorry, I got to run.
Go.
Yeah, let me just get a photo.
We got work to do.
Oh, we were discussing coming out publicly and having to have that discussion, and you were telling us about your own experience. But Janet, what has it been like for you to have that conversation in a professional setting?
When I was 26, when I decided to step forward and be open, I guess invite the world into knowing that I'm trans, right? So having grown up in Hawaii, I came out at 12 years old and transitioned through middle school and high school. And so when I went to college and grad school in New York City, I didn't think that it was something that I needed to kind of, go up and say, hi, I'm Janet, I'm trans. I came there to be a writer, right? And so I wrote for a number of years at, your sister publication, People. And I was just seeing like the It Gets Better kind of movement on YouTube, and I was, following certain stories like the murder of Larry Letitia King in their classroom. I saw, suicide of Tyler Clemente. We covered that for People. Both stories we covered, they were on the cover. And there was a part of me that just felt like I had a different affirming experience that I hadn't seen. And I was holding on to that. And as a writer, the reason why I decided to write and wanted to write was that I could tell the truth. And so in that sense, my career for me really started when I stepped forward and told my own story, wrote my 2 books. And those books then led me to being able to, do all the stuff that I do now, like writing and directing for Pose, and creating, as Ruby said, creating the images and the stuff that I was craving growing up, looking for, searching for. But it was incredibly scary. Like even in New York City, there was no protections for, anyone in employment or in housing if you're trans or queer or LGBT, right? So I didn't know if I was going to lose my job. I didn't have any financial backing to fall back on. My family didn't have money like that to take care of me, and so it was a sacrifice, and it was scary. But it was the greatest risk that I ever did, was to tell the truth. And so, if my 12-year-old self could step forward and tell the truth about her experience, why couldn't my 26-year-old self do the same? And so,
was that a challenge though when you were covering those specific stories in the magazine? Were you thinking, should I personalize this, or because you were a journalist, you were able to not personalize it?
Yeah, because everything's in third person.
Right.
So it's kind of like, you're an omnipresent kind of narrator.
Sure.
And so because I wasn't in the story, I knew that my perspectives and my own experiences help color and shape how those stories were told, and even just choosing to be able to tell the stories that I wanted to tell. But there was a part of me that just was like, ugh, with all this like dying and harassment and, the lack of representation for trans people, and specifically young trans people at the time, that there was no affirming images. And so I was basically like, bitch, I guess you gotta do it. And I think that we all come to that crossroads after a while where it's like you're searching for something. You're searching for the representation, you're searching for the hero, and then you kind of realize like, oh.
And that was the case for me. I mean, almost verbatim, right? I was 20 years old when I did My So-Called Life, and I was playing the first gay teenager on primetime TV, and so it was not lost on me, the responsibility that came with that. And also you have to remember the time that it was. It was 1994, 95, and it was a moment. I mean, we had Melissa, we had Katie Lang, we had Elton John who were talking, but there was nobody quite like me. And I wanted to see someone like me talking about it. And like you said, bitch, it had to be you, So I literally came out to my parents because of My So-Called Life, because I knew I was gonna come out publicly. And I was like, well, I should probably tell them first. So I literally came out because of My So-Called Life, because I wanted to send a message that the story I was telling on My So-Called Life was one that I stood behind and supported. But I also knew that I wanted to come out publicly, and it's funny that you said nobody asked, because I was literally waiting for somebody to ask.
Yeah.
And nobody would ask.
No.
Because it's just the way that it was then. It was like, you don't ask.
Don't
people
ask,
that.
don't tell, no.
So I went to my gay producer, Alan Poole, who was our line producer at the time, and I said, I want to do this. I want to tell my story. And I was on set at the time, and he was like, you know, go finish your work. Let me work on this. And he called up the Advocate, and they came to my apartment, and I put on a poet shirt. I don't know why. And and I you know, they printed it, and that was the end of it. But it was a conscious choice, and it was a conscious choice for people like you, because it was lonely out there, man, and then to be inspired by you in return is a full circle moment for me.
For each of you, do you feel like being out and public about being a member of the LGBTQ plus community has helped your career, hurt your career, both?
Oh, I always tell people I went from selling about 1 million records, each record, to coming out and then putting out the next record, and it sold 6 million records. So, you know, I said my coming out was a publicity stunt, but you know, it was.
Gay to pay, huh?
Yeah, you know, hey, there you go. It's working for me. But I found it at that time, again, no social media. All of a sudden I had more press than I ever had. And I can look at anything and go, oh, that happened because I was gay, but I've always chosen not to do that, and just really felt like I've always just represented myself with my work, and either you like the work or not, and if you choose not to listen to it because I'm gay, that's your problem, you know, and that's not mine. And so I can't look back and ever think that it hurt my career, ever.
I think it changed the trajectory of my career. I probably would have had a different experience, but because I came out so early, and when I came out in the mid 90s, I think there was a hunger to tell LGBT stories, but there was a lack of people willing to play those roles. And so after My So-Called Life was canceled, people started to call me because they knew I was not only willing but excited to play them. And so then I started to feel like my art was of service, and that I was using it to further visibility and to further the conversation. And so then I mindfully chose roles that could help me do that. It's why I did Rent, you know, it's why it was a dream to be on Broadway, but it was also an opportunity to talk about what was happening to this community at the time. And it continues to be that for me. So I always feel like, yeah, I may have had different opportunities. I may have played different roles, but would they have been as fulfilling and satisfying and dream-making as it has been? Probably not.
How about for either of you?
Well, my initial goal, you know, when I came to New York was that I wanted to be, you know, the features editor of Vogue. That's what I wanted to do. That's a great dream. But I think if I didn't tell my own story, I would not have written 2 books, been able to, you know, help shape and create one of the most, and this is, you know, truly close to my heart, one of the most trailblazing TV series on ever. The fact that that cast and those stories are being able to be told in such a glorious and beautifully shot and heartfelt way to redefine what a family drama is with Pose, you know, all the things that I've been able to do have all started because I decided to tell my story, and I decided to tell the truth and to live authentically, fully as myself. And so for me, it's similar to Wilson and to Melissa, where it's like I felt like a pathway opened up after I just was like, you know what, this is who I am, deal with it.
We continue to grow and evolve, both as a community and as spokespeople for the community, and that in recent years has come to taking in gender non-conforming pronouns, and there's a lot of stuff that even as members of the LGBTQ community we have to learn and grow. How do you guys approach all that, being such active and vocal people about LGBTQ rights, to make sure that you're kind of up on what the proper terminologies are and all of that?
Well, young people have always been at the start, at the beginning of every major movement. So when I think about the way in which language and identities and expressions have evolved, I look to young people to help guide me, right? And so if there are new gender markers and there are new genders and expressions and new definitions for sexualities, my job as a person within this community is to be as inclusive and tolerant and welcoming and as anyone else. And so my job is to educate myself and you know, they call me auntie and mom and stuff, you know. I'm like, bitch, I'm so young, but but you know, it's
who are we, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you have two choices in that. You can hear that there's a new pronoun, or that so-and-so has decided that they're now more comfortable being known as so-and-so, and you have two choices. You can be tolerant and go, okay, that's what it is, or you can, I will never.
This is going too far.
This is too harumph. Not on my part.
But even thinking
like, that
about
doesn't even
Ruby,
make sense. Like,
you know, Ruby's own career, you know, and your own way in which you've talked about being gender fluid, and you know, that messes up the way that people think about queer people.
And
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
That
and the
makes
way
things-
that happened was I came to the States to get into acting, couldn't even get a manager or an agent, made a short film based on my life because I had the time to do it, and put it online just to say this is something I wanted to do, and that it went viral, which I didn't ever expect. I didn't know what that was or if it was a good thing at the time, and then got an opportunity to audition for Orange Is the New Black because they wanted to have a gender neutral character. So it is interesting how, you know, you've all sort of mentioned it's pivoted us in a completely different direction we couldn't have expected, but just the most blessed direction, and you just then follow the universe's guide there. But yeah, it was that video that helped me get Orange, which then opened the doors to actually being able to have a career in the States at all.
In terms of having terminology, because obviously you felt the way you feel, you know, since childhood, but to have now words that you're able to express that in a way that other people understand it in a word, does that change
Well, sometimes
things?
a word becomes bigger than you, or bigger than you think. And when it comes to gender fluidity, gender neutrality, it's become, and I do like what we're talking about, talking to younger people, talking about what this means to them, and hearing them out at different, you know, you go to rallies or you go to GLAAD events and you watch these documentaries and these videos, and they teach you so much. But I think that when I remember that there was a singer in Australia called Missy Higgins who came out eventually as sort of sexuality fluid. And when I said that I was sort of gender fluid in the video, it was kind of because, that's what that video was about. It was because I kind of remember what she said and thought, well, that's me. Like, I'm fluid in my gender. But then it became a much more coined term that became a lot more, I got backlash, and that's when you realize you have to keep up on the terminology, that when I got cast as a lesbian in Batwoman, that I didn't know that being a gender fluid woman meant that I couldn't be a lesbian, because I'm not a woman enough and not lesbian enough. And so that was my initial response was, and then I was like, wait, let me just figure this one out, because it matters to someone that understands this differently to my understanding. How do I right this wrong? Because if someone out there is upset by this, I need to know why and how to fix it. And so that's when I sort of said, well, I'm a woman that identifies as a woman. I'm not trans. I haven't had any changes on that since the video, but if gender fluidity means that I can't identify as a woman at any point, then I guess I can't be that. It's just that maybe I'm on a different scale of a gender. Maybe I need to make up another term, but it's one that doesn't step on any toes. One where I can be fluid in my gender, but also know that I'm a lesbian, because otherwise I'm not sure what I am. It gets a little complicated.
You know, I started out, I was a young activist, right? And when you're a young activist, in my experience, you do a lot of talking because you must, and you want to be heard. And then I started working at GLAAD, as an older activist. And I learned something else, which is you have to listen. That it's as important, if not more important. And so the only reason why I'm bringing this up is times change, you know, and with the times come a younger generation that has its own perspective. And it's easy to get defensive and to think you know everything. But I ask people to remember what it was like to want to be heard and stop talking and just listen for a minute sometimes.
Yeah, I think I have to answer the question about did it affect a career. I was a little bit concerned because I was on a show called How I Met Your Mother where I was playing a very, very straight alpha male best friend kind of guy. I was concerned mostly that the writers were gonna then feel like they needed to write jokes for me differently because public awareness was maybe a little higher. And that wasn't the case. And I just kept playing it, and I'm happy, you know, my job as an actor is to play as many different types of roles as I can. And so I'm just trying to like be turning on as many different demographics as possible. So for me, when that happened and I was able to stand taller and be who I actually was, then I could flirt with guys, I could flirt with girls, and I could flirt with older people, and it almost made it more inclusive as opposed to more marginalized in a way, because I was now able to just kind of, I like flirting. Like I think that as humans, that's kind of, you want to be told that you look nice, and you want to be told that, you know, you want a connection with people. And so I think
Like
when you're able to be...
When we first met and then he told me I look like a 12-year-old boy.
I did. I did.
Because honey, it
I
worked.
said, I said you were
literally
gorge,
ran to the room when
first
he
of all.
gets me.
And then I said, look at your face, you're so... I said, you look like you could be a 12-year-old boy.
And I went, thank you so much.
And then I felt really bad, like you were going to be offended by that.
Oh no, I told
didn't mean it
everyone.
with
I was like, he
offensive.
gets me, he understands me, he sees me, I feel
love
understood.
it. You're like anime. How does that happen?
I love you, but sorry, continue.
No, I just think, I mean, that was my end takeaway. My fear was that I would get less jobs. And my takeaway, in fact, was that people were I think, more intrigued by me and what I had to say, because I was able to say it without any guys or guards. And yeah, we're not either or, right? We're ands.
I'm always interested too, like, you know, I agree with you. You want to feel as an actor that you can play everything and anything. But I sometimes feel like when people hear that they feel like being out limits that possibility. But for me, you know, I've only played gay characters, and I feel like they have been as varied and different as anybody else's. But I feel, but the point of that is, it's because we as a community are so varied and diverse that, you know, I think we have to remind producers and writers that if you're writing a gay character or an LGBTQ character, that there isn't a template, you know, that we come in all different experiences, and we are as vast as the entire human race. And hopefully, as we continue to be portrayed in the media, we'll start seeing even more diversity in those portrayals.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Amen. And well, that's exactly why Entertainment Weekly does this LGBTQ issue every year, is to help not only with visibility, but help celebrate the LGBTQ plus community. And we really are so grateful that all of you were here today to be a part of the shoot, to be a part of the magazine. You can check out each one of their individual covers, but if you want to collect all of them, that's purchasable at EW.com. Make sure to check out all of our LGBTQ issue coverage, both online and in the magazine. Thank you guys again so much for being here. It was such an honor to be,
Thank
to be
you,
part of this
EW.
conversation.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you guys.